Good morning. This is Mike Hayes. I'm with the Executives Association of Greater Phoenix. It goes by the Egypt moniker, but today is our premier podcast, and we have some great guests to talk about economy, interest rates, business, and whatnot. Hope you stay tuned. What I'd like to do is give each person a second to introduce themselves, and then we'll do some light commentary from each person on their business and what kind of challenges they're having going forward. Victor?
Victor Christic, Affordable GPS Tracking, Phoenix, Arizona.
John Angelo with the Angelo Group at Compass Real Estate here in Phoenix as well.
Chris Carr, Guild Mortgage, serving the whole state of Arizona.
Okay, we got two real estate people, and Victor, I wanted to start with you because you have an unusual business that a lot of people probably haven't heard of. But if you had a car stolen or something, or you're somebody in a business that wants to track people that are driving for you, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business?
Sure. Mike, what we do, we install a GPS tracking device, which is a satellite device. It's been commercialized by adding a modem to it, a phone modem. So basically, we're tracking the location, latitude, longitude, speed, direction of travel. We transmit that information via a cellular modem up to our servers, where all the back-end magic happens, where it's plotted on the Google Maps. And what that does, it gives the owner of companies like service companies, HVAC, plumbers, electrical, whatever, it gives them the ability to watch what that vehicle is doing. And also, it's a great dispatch tool. So if you've got 15, 20 technicians out in the field, it's easy to spot them. If they're completed on a job, the dispatcher can say, hey, I've got an emergency call, and I know I can send this guy because he's the closest to it. So basically, it's a tool to manage your vehicles and your technicians out in the field. There's other benefits, like you mentioned, stolen vehicle recovery and all of that, but the main goal of having this equipment in your vehicle is to manage and give you peace of mind that your technicians are doing what they're supposed to be doing and where they're supposed to be.
Now, a lot of people think the Big Brother thing and all that. What's some of the cons that people mention when they hear about that they're doing this, like employees of maybe the owner that came to you?
Well, I'm doing this almost 20 years already, so GPS has been around a while. Initially, when we first started, yes, that was the big thing. Big Brother was the slogan that all the employees were using. But what it really did is really show the employer what your technicians are doing, on their job with your vehicle. Are they speeding? Are they idling? Sitting around in the park with their vehicle running. So yeah, that Big Brother thing kind of went away. It was a novelty when it first came out. But now it's very common. It's become a commodity. So it's a useful tool. Every company should have it.
Well, I know people groan when they hear about it because now you're being watched, so you got to pay attention when you're actually driving. You're not speeding or you're not hanging out somewhere at the Circle K or places like that all day. Now, I've read some things that said that one of the best things about your product is that it cuts down on the gas because you don't have people running errands and things like that. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, first of all, they're just driving where they're supposed to be driving. They're not using it for personal use. Speeding is a gas killer. Idling, if your vehicle is idling for an hour each day, that's a gallon of gas, plus it adds about 7 miles to your maintenance cost. So if you have 50 vehicles out there, or even 25, these guys are idling 2 hours a day. That builds up real quick, so your gas bill is way up. If you can manage that idling and reduce their speed, you're saving a lot of money, probably enough to even pay for the equipment.
Well, I think that's probably the best part of the product is that it's in the savings end, not just the, hey, what are you doing end. So, that's why I wanted to ask that because I think that gets missed of, if you got that many vehicles out, you could burn a lot of gas, especially when it goes up and down like it has.
Oh, absolutely. Even diesel. Look at the price. Diesel was over $5 for a while. So if you're burning that much diesel, it's a lot of fuel, and it's a lot of pollution too, Mike. Take a look at that. It's spewing a lot of fumes out.
Here's another question. Has there been unusual places that you found employees that they probably should have been, like maybe at the dance hall or?
How about the Apache
maybe-
Flame?
Oh yeah, or they're at the casino all day betting. Have you had something that a customer had that was pretty outrageous or that you never seen before?
Well, yeah, two things come to mind. One, when GPS first came out and we started selling it, and the employees are seeing what was happening, a lot of the technicians, and I'm not going to mention what vertical it was, but they'd wind up at one of the bars at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd be there from 2
What's
to 12.
wrong with that? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I guess nothing.
If they're not on your dime.
It's good for the bar business. I
Right.
mean, I guess we must have put a hurting on that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, and then there was an instance where it was a pickup truck for a construction company. So the guy was allowed to take the truck home for the weekend, but not use it for personal use. But it'd wind up at Bartlett Lake, him towing a boat. So one day the owner decided, he's had enough. He took somebody else with him, got the keys to that truck, went to Bartlett Lake, disconnected the boat trailer, and left it there and took off with the truck. So
Wow, how did that story end? Did the guy end up quitting or what happened?
Nah, he was. I think they kept him, but I think he learned his lesson. So
Yeah, well, once they slap that thing on there, now you got to kind of watch what
yeah.
you're doing.
But now you mentioned Big Brother. There's another one that's even worse than the GPS. What the drivers are complaining about now is the dash cameras. So I mean, dash cameras nowadays typically, you have one camera facing forward, roadside, and one facing the driver. And the reason for the driver is, if the guy is like being distracted on his phone, texting or whatever, he's got his eyes off the road. It's about over 80% of the accidents are caused because of that. So now that's the big thing. A lot of the unions were fighting it. You don't want to watch the guy eat his food or pick his nose or whatever. But it's really a management tool of driver safety. So if this guy is always maybe tailgating, hard braking, hard acceleration, it's all part of the camera and the GPS system. And there's programs out there where there's an app, the driver has to download the app, and if he's always hitting harsh braking, meaning he's always tailgating. So he has to take a video class, go through the class, and he has to pass the class.
Like a traffic school kind of
Yeah,
thing?
sort of like it's a driver safety school, basically, what it is, or an app. So.
Well, I don't think I would be able to work for any company that has one of those because everything you said, I did on the way over here. Probably 2 to 3 times. The hard
Right.
braking, cornering, flooring
cornering,
it,
right.
yeah, all that other stuff.
Stop
Because-
the car.
accelerate.
And I'm a big worrier about the environment, so I might not make it through the end of the day.
All right, but let me see the other side of the coin here too, Mike. We've seen videos from customers that had sent us where it actually exonerates the driver too. We had this one vehicle, I'm not going to mention what kind of vehicle it was, but he was at a red light in a left turn signal, left turn lane with his signal on. The light turns green, he's fully into that turn already, and here comes a gold Lexus, smacks into him, and then bounces off to the right. The guy, of course, says a couple cuss words, comes out, looks at his truck. This lady comes out yelling and screaming at him, "You tried to kill me, you ran a red light." And the guy just kind of gives her a look, and he looks up to the camera, points to the camera. She looks up and then puts her head down and walks away quick.
Oh,
So that alone, I mean, that saved that company, I don't know how much money in insurance. I
Yeah.
mean, she could have.
Well, because companies are an easy mark when you
Oh,
get hit. Everybody limps out of the car on
You're
a
a
5
target.
mile an hour deal.
You're a
and
target,
acts like they
exactly.
need to go to the
Yeah.
doctor every 5 minutes.
Yeah, but there's more than just that. I mean, there's a lot. So.
And we don't need to feed all these attorneys on TV every day because I'm tired of watching their commercials. Is there anything you could? What's as far as your business? What headwinds do you see for the next couple years, and what tailwinds do you see for?
Well, when I first started this almost 20 years ago, I mean, competition was there. The bigger guys were into it. But nowadays, I think there's over 3 million little companies out there selling GPS. So the competition's stiff. But we're still able to do it. I mean, we have a good customer support team. You call us for any kind of issue, we pick up the phone. You'll get a live person. They'll know who you are. You're not just a number to us, you're a customer. We need your business, and we want to keep you happy. So the competition is always going to be there. What I see really, the near future headwind would be the tariffs, how that's going to affect our equipment. A lot of our equipment does come out of China and the Far East. So the tariffs might affect not only pricing, but also supply. So I think the demand's going to be there, but the supply is going to be tough.
That's good advice and good forward thinking as far as you're going. Now, let's move on to John Angelo. John, everybody knows about the real estate. Well, why don't you start, because people have questions all the time. What's the deal with the commission thing? I mean, can you boil it down to like a third grader can understand for us?
Sure, absolutely. So let's go back and look the way that it was since the beginning. You would look inside the multiple listing service as a buyer's agent, and you could see the commission that was going to be offered to you that flowed through the seller, right? And that was set up by the seller and their agent. So the Department of Justice didn't like that. One, the seller was dictating what the commission earned would be for the buyer and the buyer's agent, right? They said, well, those two they're incongruent, right? We need to separate this out. We need to let the seller pay for the seller side, the buyer pay for the buyer side, right? And so that's essentially, that's one of the reasons why things got changed. There are a couple of others, but that was the main one. So today, we've always had a buyer-broker employment agreement. But when the commission was set inside the multiple listing service, we really didn't use that form that much because we knew what we were getting paid. So there were some brokerages that forever always wanted to have a buyer sign a buyer-broker exclusive employment agreement, even though that commission was inside the MLS, and many didn't. So now you have to have that signed. So now when I'm taking a listing, we take our commission, we negotiate that commission with the seller, and then we basically say to the seller, let the buyer and the buyer's agent ask us what we might like to pay as a commission. So there is a specific form now called a seller compensation agreement. That gets submitted when an offer gets submitted. So a buyer and a buyer's agent say, hey, this is how much we want to pay for the house. These are the terms. Hey, by the way, here's another document that is asking, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, will you compensate us X, which is on that form, right? And then the seller really gets to decide, hey, was the offer strong? Is it going to meet my net or go above my net that I thought? Hey, maybe I'm going to give exactly what's on that seller compensation agreement to the buyer's agent, right? Or they might say, gosh, that offer came in, it's pretty weak. Terms and conditions aren't great. We know that the buyer has that buyer-broker exclusive employment agreement already signed. We don't know what that commission amount is, okay? They're asking for this. We're not going to pay them that. We're going to pay them below that. And now it's really incumbent upon whatever that agreement is with the buyer and the buyer's agent to fill that gap if there is a gap in that commission. So probably a lot tough to maybe explain it, but it's pretty easy when you start to sit down now with buyers and sellers. Everybody kind of knows, what's expected of them and how it's going to work.
And it has lowered the commissions, I would imagine. Depending on the property?
I don't know that yet. I don't think we have that data quite yet because this started back in August. We probably need a year or so of kind of looking at it. I can say personally, it really hasn't changed much for us. I think that it's making all of us better agents because we have to be more articulate with this is what we're charging and why. This is the value you're getting. This is what you're paying for. And I think when that gets laid out and people actually realize, holy cow, there's a lot going on here. I understand why you're charging this. We're good with that. And I think that's making us all better at what we do and just explaining that and then just having, truthfully, a better plan on how we're working with buyers and sellers and being able to show that.
Yeah, in Arizona we got, I don't know how many agents they've said, like 30,000 or something or whatever it is. What is it?
Yeah. Well, I think in
Worse than I thought.
yeah, it is. In Maricopa County, I believe it's roughly 42,000
Wow.
in Maricopa County.
Maricopa.
Just in Maricopa County. But to give you an idea, I'm sure that this number is the same locally as it is nationally, but the National Association of Realtors came out last year and said there are 1.5 million realtors in the United States. 700,000 of those agents last year did not do a deal. So almost half of everybody that has a real estate license in the United States did not do one deal last year.
And that's probably, it might be staff or somebody that has to talk about a property, but they don't really do any of the deals. But then the rest of it's just people that want, hey, go get your real estate license so you can make a ton of money. And we know that's not how it works.
It's the numbers are really, we look at these all the time, but they polled realtors last year, and 86% of realtors polled last year thought they would not have a real estate license within the next 3 years. Meaning they're not selling anything, they're not doing any business, they're not going to go through their education again to renew their license.
Yeah, because you obviously have to pay for that, and then you have to have somebody hold your license.
Sure, yeah.
So it really, inactive licenses, it probably goes through a lot of different turns.
Sure.
Of course, anybody that has to be required to study to keep a license, well, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So we just won't do it.
Sure.
So here's another question. How is so what's the market like now? Take the commission thing off the table. What are we looking at in Arizona? You see these 72 sold who just, they changed their name to something different? Why? Because now they can't do 72 sold, or what?
I don't know about that. I think there's always just like Victor just said, there's 3 million people that sell GPS, and there's 40,000 realtors here, and everybody has a different approach to it. And I think you have to pick the approach that you like as a buyer or a seller. We're not for everybody. It is what it is. You have to, we always talk about with our clientele that we're there before, during, and after the sale. We're not going anywhere. We're professional realtors. We've been doing this for 23 years. It's my wife and I, and we have a small team, and it's a very close-knit group of people that have worked together. Like Deanna's been with us for almost 17 years. We work in a certain way. We work by referral. We're not big people that are going out and just trying to get random people. We have a database of people that we really like to communicate with. But there are a lot of people that that's not their gig as a buyer or seller. They'll go with a discount person because they don't really care about what happens during or after the transaction. They think it's easy. We get some of those people after they've tried to do those things that realize, holy cow, I can't get a return phone call. No one's working on the weekend. There's no consistency in how we're moving through the transaction. So it's a little bit of preference from a buyer and a seller as well.
So no commercials where you wave your arms like this and stuff and yell on the TV?
None of that.
None of that?
None of that. No.
Does so like in Phoenix right now, like where's like a hot spot that you know of, or places where people are preferring to move?
Sure. So it's interesting. Let's take let me twist that a little bit and say that the market's segmented, right, by geography, by price point, by product type. Is it a single family residence? Is it a townhome? Is it apartment style? Whatever. Right now, between about 500,000 and below on a list price, and you can smear that across Phoenix from Buckeye all the way out to Queen Creek. From about 500,000 and below, that market can be a little bit competitive because that's where the first-time home buyers can get in and where investors might play. And so there's a little bit more cash in those deals. Above about 1.5 million, that market is also really, really hot. And even above 2.5, when you get into the uber luxury, that market is just white hot right now. And again, mostly cash in those areas, right? The middle ground from about 500 to 1.5 million, that's where things can get a little bit difficult as a listing agent and as a seller, because that's in that $1 million range is where the majority of loans get originated. So those people are really sensitive to where rates are. It's not 3% like it was. Now we're at 7 plus or minus, depending on product type, credit score, all that kind of stuff. But that part of the market can be a little bit tougher. So the bottom end, a little bit more activity, and in the upper end, more activity. Then you've got to just kind of pick around town. The second layer to that is, where are new homes being built?
Okay.
They're super competitive because they can buy down rates permanently. So, you can go out to a new home builder and in some instances get a brand new house for 3.95% 30-year fixed. Well, it's hard to compete as a seller in the neighborhood right next to that when that buyer's got to come in at 7% and buy the same priced house.
Exactly.
So we're always looking at those different dynamics on, selling, buying, when what's the most advantageous for the buyer and the seller.
What do you see as challenges, headwinds, tailwinds for your business?
I think that it can be the same for us too. Just when you talk about, we don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. We don't know what's going to happen with these natural disasters. We haven't really even digested. Here we are in late February of 2025. We still haven't digested what's going to happen with all the stuff in California with all the fires. So that's still in process. So that could be positive for our market. That could be negative for our market. If all of a sudden building starts to go gangbusters in Southern California, probably pulls talent away from Phoenix to go and work. And you're going to have your best contractors and your best workers potentially going over there because they're booming. We're here, and we've already struggled with building houses over the last 15 years. We could, again, be in that position where we just don't have enough workers to build the houses that are needed, or the apartments, or whatever that multifamily looks like. So I don't know. I mean, one or more of those things will happen along with interest rates. We just don't know exactly, when and how deeply it will affect us. But we've got our radar up for a variety of different things right now.
Well, I can tell you, as somebody that does recruiting, the market is really slow to find people. And unfortunately, this California deal is going to provide a big sucking sound for labor whenever they start figuring out how they're going to redevelop it. And there's going to be some type of bailout. Let's be reasonable here, because this stuff always happens.
Yeah.
And that usually comes with premium wages for people. So especially semi-skilled and skilled labor, that stuff's just going to drive 8 hours, rent a motor home, work at the place, and pocket the money. And it's going to really drain resource. Not only that, but it also becomes, because I'm kind of a closet economist, inflationary, because you got the wall board and the appliances and all the other stuff that has to be bought. So people are like, well, we don't have enough, so of course we raise the price.
Absolutely.
So that's another danger I don't think people are really thinking about.
I think you're right. Absolutely.
Well, last but not least, Chris, tell us a little bit about what you do, and obviously you and John kind of work hand in hand. Give us a little, couple minutes on what you do.
Well, I originate loans that help people buy houses or refinance, residential only. John just covered a lot of things that that I could also address. But so Guild Mortgage is a large national independent mortgage banker. We don't do anything but residential lending. A publicly traded company. I had a small mortgage banking firm for 25 years, and we merged with Guild Mortgage about 10 years ago in 2014. So, I've been doing this for my whole career, and it's been a great opportunity. I love helping people find a house, buy a house, manage the financing, be sure they can afford the payment, which is an issue right now, as John mentioned, because rates are higher. And what we see is, we did a lot of business with rates in the 7s or even quite a bit higher. The difference is that houses weren't as expensive then, as they are now. But, I'm originating loans for, purchase and refinance. And we have a multitude of, products. We do some second mortgages now for people that want to get cash out that are fixed rates, that don't want to get rid of their 3% loan. They don't want to refinance to 7 to pull cash out. So, we're in that space as well.
So is that the HELOC?
Called a HELoan because it's
HELoan.
not a lock. A HELOC's traditionally a kind of a loan that you can draw down on, like a giant. I call it a giant credit card.
Right.
A HELoan is a loan that's a 30-year fixed rate. The rate's a lot lower, and I've actually been originating a fair number of those for people who have finally decided that we want to do some things to the house, or we want to do this or do that, but we're not going to. We're not going to refinance our first mortgage, which would be insane. And we really don't want a HELOC because rates on HELOCs are tied to prime and usually prime plus a spread. So the HELoan's a better, is a better fit.
So that's very interesting because I've never heard of that before. Let's elaborate on that. So I got a loan from John's Bank or whatever it is for 3%.
Right.
And I've got, it's $1 million net or worth, and I got a $300,000 debt. How do you, what vehicle to get that?
So basically, you'd come and say, hey, I want a second mortgage. I'm going to do this or I want to do that. I just did a loan for a gentleman in Flagstaff. He's doing a huge remodel on a place in Forest Highlands, and he needed $500,000 to do it. And he borrowed against his primary residence in Paradise Valley because he was capped. They capped these on second homes at like $350 in our situation. So he got a $500,000 loan at a really good rate, almost no cost for the loan just because of the loan size, and so he's doing his remodel with that money. So it could be a multitude of
What's those
reasons.
rates generally?
Those rates are right now around 8.5%.
Okay.
So you're in the sevens on
But it's fixed.
but it's a fixed rate. It's a 30-year loan,
And you can refi that later on?
you could, yeah. If what people really are hoping, I think, is that rate's going to, the first mortgage rates will come down enough to maybe they can get a 4.5% new loan that rolls the old, first that's lower and combines the second that they've borrowed. And it kind of depends on the size. I mean, I just closed one yesterday. Guy had a house worth $435 and he owed 150. We were servicing that loan. He wanted $60,000, and he didn't want to refinance his first because it's at 3 something. And so he got a HELoan, and he's got $60,000 now in his pocket to go do what he wants. And because he has a first that's quite a bit bigger than his second, it'll take rates dropping quite a bit to make sense for him to combine those two. Rates need to be in probably the 4% range or so, where he'd be better off than just keeping what he's got. But he's got the ability to buy to borrow and to do what he wants to do without disrupting, his existing first.
Well, it doesn't cause you to sell something, so you have to pay a tax.
Exactly. And this person didn't have the means to do that anyway. So.
Do they? It's interesting because as much as I waste my time watching TV, Gunsmoke and all those great shows that were over 40 years ago, I never seen anything about the ELO. Now I see the HELOC.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're doing a great job, promoting that.
Well,
especially,
I have my classification talk in 2 weeks, and I'll be talking about that.
Well, when you're talking to our group, everybody's cheap.
Right.
Okay, and they want the highest, return on investment.
Right.
And I don't want to have any chance to lose any money.
Right.
So there you go.
There you go.
What do you think? What's the market for you right now? Is it stabilized, or is there still that rate shock?
So I think we still have sticker shock from the COVID rates. I think John might agree with that. Sure. And people are coming out of the sticker shock. I think people are realizing that, we're not going to see 3% rates again. We're not even going to see 4. We might not even see 5. And so what I'm starting to see is some new business over the last, say, 90 days that's picked up. And I think we're starting to see people come out of the woodwork a little bit, realizing that, I've just waited as long as I can wait. So I think we have the early throes of what I've been talking about as a pent-up demand. I think there's a huge pent-up demand right now that is just waiting to enter the market, and they are waiting because of interest rates. That's the main reason. And we're seeing people go, we better do this or we better do that, and so I've gotten busier in the last 90 days than I've been, the last 2 years for almost everyone that originates loans or is a realtor have been slower than it was in, say, 20 and 21, because in 2021 we had a feeding frenzy. Everybody wanted to buy a house, rates were low, you had multiple offers. John remembers that, where you couldn't get seller concessions, you couldn't get anything like that. You probably had to offer more than the price, and there might be 7 or 8 offers that we're going to look at the offers on Saturday, so get your offer in here. And it was a bidding war. Well, those days are long gone. And John and I have discussed this, but I think he agrees with me right now, is an awesome time to buy a house because sellers are motivated. There still is not enough inventory. And we don't know when we will see enough inventory, and that's why housing prices really haven't dropped that much. But we are seeing, especially, almost across the board, sellers willing to make concessions. John and I have worked on a couple transactions here just in the last 30 days where the sellers made a pretty big concession in a entry level, if you will, price.
And before it used to be
Point.
the finger.
Yeah.
They gave you the
If
finger.
you ask for 50 cents or any kind of repairs or anything like that, forget it. You're lucky you got the house. We had 8 offers. You got the house, so don't ask for anything. And I've read a lot of articles about people who in 20 and 21 bought houses without a lot of discretion, so to speak. A fairly large number of those were not happy with the house that they got, not happy with any, you name it, things about it. And sometimes they weren't happy with the condition of the house. But they had to react so quickly, and they got a property inspection, but they really couldn't do much about what was maybe not what they liked about the house because the seller was not going to do anything, about it. And I think, John, something just popped in my head that I think it's good that we didn't have the change in commissions during that time. Mm-hmm. Because sellers would have, said, hey, we're not paying that. I might just comment on John did a great job of describing this new agreement type of thing and what happened with the NAR lawsuit and all that. As a company, Guild hasn't seen in 94% of transactions, this was maybe 30 days ago, any change in how the sellers have responded to paying the buyer's commission. You just have to do it differently with an agreement. And I think he highlighted how it probably makes for a better transaction. So I think it's and it hasn't really. I don't think it's hurt the buyer's agent. And it hasn't caused the buyer typically to have to come up with funds that they maybe don't have. We deal with a lot of people putting, a small amount of money down that just don't have the money to make up, the difference between what the listing agent is going to pay the lister, the seller is going to pay the listing agent, and then what the seller is going to pay the buyer. We've seen a really good response to the seller still willing to pay the buyer's commission, but it's just done differently, and I think better. So,
Well, as a closet economist, as I mentioned, one of the interesting things is I think people get used to, there's a new normal, and then you've got to go, you do that math problem where it's versus renting, which you get nothing to write off, and then at least the mortgage you're paying, you're getting a deduction on your taxes. So, you could make that. If you have to spend $3,500, renting a place, what's the number? Do people look at that, or they don't figure it out?
We share that with them that, hey, you don't have any deduction on your rent. You're going to have an interest deduction, and people, I think that was talked about, years ago more than it is now. When probably now is when it should be, mentioned more. But we do see, matter of fact, in our sales meeting 2 days ago, our manager talked about with someone who was doing a bank statement loan. You can do a loan with just using bank statements for self-employed people who don't show a lot of income, but they run a lot of money through their company.
Is that the same way? Are we going back to the picture of the guy with the lawnmower, and that was his application for the bank?
Well, no, you still have to fill out a pretty good application, but you don't have to provide tax returns. You provide bank statements.
Right.
The lending world has tightened significantly since pre-2006, 7, and 8.
When they didn't really care.
Well, no, but the bank statement loans come back to see that someone has a really good cash flow but doesn't show a lot of income on their tax returns, and but now they pay a little higher rate for that typically. But guess what? You're not paying taxes. So and that's a little different story than what you're suggesting. But yeah, people who buy a house should take a look at what the interest deduction is going to be and how that lowers their payment really. And we talk with people about.
I don't think people a lot of times realize that, and of course we don't teach it anywhere. So
No.
the only way you learn it is to go through it if you even pay attention.
Right. Right.
This has been one of my beefs for years. There's no financial education, and that way you can't educate people, and this stuff should be starting a lot earlier. But now I'm on the soapbox.
It's interesting you bring that up because there's no curriculum in any college to learn to be a mortgage originator. There really isn't. It's always been learned by osmosis. Get in the industry somehow and hope somebody's going to teach you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works. And so there is no way. That's why we pride ourselves as a company and myself personally on, I work with high-end buyers. I work with a lot of self-employed people, a lot of high net worth people. We do a lot of jumbo financing, but on the other end, we do loans for, John and I are working on a deal right now for a first-time home buyer, 23-year-old gentleman who is a sponge, and we're holding his hand through the process. And not in a negative sort of way, in a very positive sort of way, and not a demeaning sort of way, but a way that he's very appreciative of. And it's great when you have a buyer like that who realizes the skills that the realtor and the loan originator have and bring to the table in their many years of experience, and really do care about them and understand that, hey, this is a process. It's a big deal buying a house as a 23-year-old when you've never done it, and you're gonna have a payment that's in the $2,500 range, and you got
to be able to make it.
That's right.
Plus the accidentals, the power bill, the lawn, the water, the.
Oh yeah, exactly. But it's not lost. And I enjoy working with those kind of people just as much as I like working with a guy who's got very complicated tax returns, that we're really good at analyzing and helping them out. But one last thing, this pent-up demand that you asked me what the market's going to look like. I think we're going to see that slowly. I thought it was going to explode, but I think now it's going to be a kind of a slow burn coming out. And I think we're starting to see the initial phase of that. Obviously, we're both hopeful about that. I think that this year will be a pretty decent year for both of our industries. And it also depends on, the quality of the individual and how hard they work. The day of, just being that part-time realtor and, do 4 or 5 deals a year for friends or relatives and, or the loan originator that, is just kind of playing around at it. Those days are long gone. You have to be a pretty consummate professional to succeed and survive, in this industry, because for the last 2 years, since COVID kind of ended, our industry has been one of the slower industries, interest rates are, are
Well, you
the
see a
reason for
lot
that.
of people, I see a lot of resumes from mortgage companies and stuff like that. And that might also be the, technology taking over too. What's the technology affecting the business?
Well, I think the technology, AI is a big deal now, and our company is all in on that. We do a huge amount of work to support all of our employees from that perspective. We use Salesforce, and we have a very robust Salesforce. You kind of build that out of a box. We've been building it for almost 10 years, and it's very, very complex, and it's very helpful to everyone in our whether it's an ops person or a salesperson. So technology has been huge with regard to that, and we embrace it. And part of the reason we embrace it is because it's necessary. But the other part of it is if you don't embrace that, you're going to get left behind. A lot of mortgage companies have failed or merged because of what's happened over the last couple of years. Guild has been able to acquire a couple, 3 really pretty sizable companies because of our servicing portfolio. Spins off of a lot of revenue, and so it's been a great place to be. From a strength standpoint, working for a company that's spending money instead of hiding behind, the fact that they're not making any money and just trying to sneak by until things get better. Things are probably not going to be like they were in 20 and 21, in the mortgage industry for a while. And there's been a lot of, mergers and a lot of acquisitions, and that's helped our company actually. So.
Well, the streamlining is the key. I mean, they can squeeze more revenue out of it. I mean, obviously, when you do that, then you've got money to buy somebody else.
Well, and we've been a proponent of remote, workplace activity prior to.
Right. You didn't have to go
COVID.
through come back to the office?
No, we didn't have to do that, and we realized, and I think it's because of the quality of our employees. We realized in advance of COVID that we had people who were really good at being remote, and so we've scaled down the number of actual office locations that we have. I rarely go to one of the 2 offices in the valley that's open, simply because I'm not close by. But I also have an office that's great. I work remote. I'm much more efficient than I think I would be, just because I'm not wasting an hour round trip driving to a spot. And our company has, like I said, embraced that for a lot of different employees, and it's wonderful to work with people that maybe aren't in Phoenix. They're doing a great job at processing a loan, being a loan officer assistant, because they can be wherever they want to be because of our systems. So,
Hey, Victor, back to you real quick. Did you learn anything exciting today, or?
I learned a lot about the mortgages and also the real estate. I mean, that's interesting about the contracts now. And it brings up the good point. I mean, you provide the service, you should be paid for it. And just like in any other industry, you've got your good guys and your bad guys. So you got to make sure you pick the right guy, right? Right
John?
company and right.
What about you?
I love to listen to, obviously Chris and I work closely together, and I mean, we know a lot about each other's business.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that. You guys spending too much time.
But I think too, but I always like to listen to something, obviously that's outside of our, our business. But I like what Victor said too, again, going back to like how many competitors he has. Like, I would have never thought that there were that many people in the business. I also wouldn't have thought about, hey, again, he brought up the about the tariffs. It's like you don't, we kind of live in our silos, and it's nice to hear that, oh my gosh, he's in a business that's totally different than ours, but yet we're still thinking about some of the same things. And so that's kind of refreshing too, that you realize, hey, I can really plug into the knowledge base of this other person, even though they're not in my industry, and they're thinking about things the way that I am, or they're bringing up things that I haven't thought about, that maybe I should be thinking about. Not even though that we're not in the same business. I like that. It's really insightful.
Yeah, it's a great session. I mean, it's nice to hear, especially when you're sitting around a table like this and you asking the questions. It's perfect. I mean,
The only thing we're missing is some good whiskey, but I am not allowed to have that till after 5 p.m. So, Chris, do you want to give us the last word?
well, I just think that as far as from the industry, as I mentioned a minute ago, we're hopeful, and I think we're optimistic. I know John's had a good start of the year. I don't think I'm speaking out of school there. I think you would consider it that, right?
Yep,
and I have as
absolutely.
well. And I'm really optimistic. I mean, I'm sure he has done a lot of work in the last 2 years to keep in touch with his clients, and to just, even though he maybe knew that there was not a lot going to happen right then, but you stay in front of people, whether it's talking to them or even just, email campaigns or whatever. And I've done a fair amount of that, and I think that's going to pay off over the next, several months. And I really do think 2025 is going to be a pretty good year. So that's the hope, and that's my thoughts at this point.
Right. So, for the 4 people that are listening, and 25% of them, go buy a house, don't pay cash, and then get a GPS, follow your kids around.
That's right.
This has been the Executives Association premier episode of our podcast.